This episode of the Smarter Business Podcast features Tony DeSimone. Tony is a business consultant, adjunct professor at the University of Buffalo, Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, and runs a podcast called Entrepreneur Island. As if that's not enough, we also discuss Tony's new book in this episode, Small Business Blind Spots, Solutions to the 8 Most Common Challenges Business Owners Fail to See. I got to read an advanced copy of this book. Go get it. It has some incredible content and it's very actionable. You could start working on your business's blind spots today. On with the episode. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe wherever you're taking in this podcast. And please leave a comment. We're always looking for feedback and it can help people find this show. The guest on this episode is Tony DeSimone. Tony, I will let you introduce yourself. You can include as many accolades as you like.
On myself. I guess if I were to just very shortly and sweetly tell you what I do is I teach the universal language of numbers. And by doing that, I help teams communicate far better with each other. And in doing so, it helps them get through some of the biggest problems that they're struggling with, which ultimately results in greater cash flow and profitability. Excellent.
And you've so you do that through your company. You can plug yourself.
You're the expert now. Yes, that's the name of my company. Which I guess if I had the opportunity, you're a marketing guy, so you could probably help me with this. Is that I probably wouldn't have named it that had I knew what I now know with the name.
Are you having, what's the issue? Spelling errors and stuff?
Yeah, for sure, spelling errors. Because your, Y-O-U-R-E,
such a common
is the mistake most of the time that people make when they're emailing, because they go Y-O-U-R. And even you're the expert now. The whole point to that was to help clients understand how to read their financials so well that they can feel that they're truly the expert of their own business on understanding the financials. However, it does sound a little arrogant, maybe, that people might think that I'm thinking that I'm the expert and I'm going to make you the expert.
Oh, okay.
And I never really, thought about that too deeply.
Right. Well, do you own both domain names? You are and your, like your and your? Because that's a $12 fix.
Yeah, no, that's true. I should probably do that.
All right, Brock, go buy that domain name and we'll sell it to Tony.
Put it in the show notes. Somebody else is going to buy it and now make me pay thousands of dollars.
That's what we're going to do. Right now, Barack is going to buy it.
Barack is leaving the room as we speak and purchasing it on GoDaddy. Well done.
Oh, we use Google domains.
I don't need to do anymore. I've already got all the value I need out of this one.
And then do you want to mention UB or your position?
I'm also adjunct professor at UB. Thank you for reminding me to talk about myself here. Adjunct professor at UB. I started off teaching the sophomores on the basics of accounting as they were taking their classes to get into the business school. And as I was teaching at UB over on that side, I learned about the branch of UB called the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership. And when I looked into that and I sat down with Tom Albrecht, who's in charge over there, the assistant dean, I realized that those were my people. They're business owners. It's technically, not technically, what you're essentially learning there is basically a mini MBA. And I realized that those were my people. And when I sat down with Tom Albrecht and explained what I can do, teach financial reports and help people understand, business owners understand how to read their financials better and how to use those financials to actually improve their operations, that was a gap at the time that he had, and so it was almost a very easy transition over to them, and I've been teaching over there for 7, 8 years now.
Yeah, excellent. That's where we met through
Yes.
CEL,
Yes.
Which I completed just earlier this year. And Tony's a very popular guy in the CEL.
Oh,
a lot
man,
of people
thank
like your chalk talks, and then you've got his additional financial classes and so on. But
Yes.
that's probably enough intro, right?
That's
You want to get into
more
it?
than enough. Oh my goodness.
And you had to do it all yourself.
It was enough time for Barack to get that other You're the Expert now.
To get the other domain.
Does anybody know who Barack is, or am I just,
No,
Okay.
he's never been mentioned.
You might want to mention
podcast.
Barack before.
We'll show a clip of Barack as part of
He's
our,
the man behind the video on the podcast.
Yeah, Barack is a video production specialist here. He's filming right now, so I guess we're kind of breaking the wall there.
Oh, did I probably like? Oh man,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm not a marketing guy, so I don't know these things.
I think I said it first. So, all right. So, Tony, part of the reason I thought it would be a great idea to have you on this podcast is because you do a lot of work in building expert status around yourself, around your consulting business. In the main way that you've done that, I think, at least the way I've come across most often, is through a podcast. So, I don't know, do you want to give people a rundown of that podcast or kind of the areas you cover there? They might want to tune in.
Yeah, the podcast is called Entrepreneur's Island. And the idea behind that is that a lot of business owners, they're struggling with their issues, and many times they feel that they're the only ones that are struggling with those issues. So they feel that they're on this island, when in fact all of the problems, any problem that they're dealing with, has been dealt with before and is more common than they think. So what I'm doing on the podcast is sharing some of those similar problems and offering solutions.
Excellent. That's that's good encapsulation. It's definitely worth checking out. If you search what services, Apple Podcasts,
and on Stitcher Radio.
Great. And then kind of dovetailing into that with the expert status, you're going to build it out even a little further with a kind of an announcement you have.
Yes. My next book, which I call Small Business Blind Spots, the 8 most common blind spots that business owners fail to see. And basically, this is an encapsulation of my being really a practitioner. I get the opportunity to go to many different small businesses, all different industries, at times 3 to 4 different businesses in one day, and I tend to see similar trends, even though they're all different companies and they all have different issues, but similar trends in regards to those issues. And so the book shares 8 of the most common trends or blind spots and the solutions that I use to help them.
Yeah. And Tony gave me an advanced copy. That's probably what we'd call that, right? Yes. It is an excellent book for any business owner, especially, I would say, small business owners, folks who are trying to do some of that fixing on their own, right? What did we say? You wanted it to be about something you could read on a plane. I read it between a couple of 45-minute flights, so it's perfect for that. It's super actionable and has a lot of worksheets and other resources tied to it. I don't know if you want to get into any specific section of it, but we talked about Nice on the disc golf course, right? So
yes, yeah. Oh my goodness, you've opened up a lot of doors there. First of all, I wrote it. It's going to have about 77 pages, but I wrote it in a way where you could read it probably on a 3-hour flight or something like that. The idea there is that it has more actionable items within each chapter than the actual, reading itself. Because the idea there is that I want you to read this book and read each chapter and feel like you've just gained an incredible amount of knowledge, and you can walk away from this book and now save thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars for your company. And I believe that in cases like Denise, which is a good example, you can very easily do that, because a lot of small businesses don't do what I'm suggesting that you do with Denise. And what Denise is just an acronym for the net income effect by cutting expenses. And basically what I'm stating there is that for the average company, it takes about $100,000 to make $6,000 of profit. So in other words, if a company, say, for instance, were a car manufacturer or something like that, if they had orders for $100,000 worth of more automobiles, they would have to purchase the steel and the plastic and the engines and the tires, and then they would have to get all of their labor in there. And then they would also have to get all the administrative help that they would also need to add to the expense to all of those new purchases, in producing those two cars or how many cars it would be. But as you trickle down those expenses on the profit and loss, by the time you consider all those expenses, you now have a profit of about $6,000. So that $100,000 after all those expenses is about $6,000. And what the Nice effect is that what's easier in most small businesses? Finding a way to achieve 100,000 more in sales? Or is it possible that you might be able to find $6,000 worth of savings? And in most cases, in small business especially, they're not run so effectively that you can't find savings that way. I share a very simple way to go deep into your expenses, into your profit and loss detail, and review all of your expenses and determine where are the areas that I'm wasting money, essentially. Similar to, for example, a lot of memberships. I had a client who they have a lot of turnover, and they use memberships such as LinkedIn, and they pay a considerable amount of money for what they use it for. And what they hadn't done is reviewed those expenses for quite some time. And when they went through this process of reviewing all the membership expenses in total, and they got to LinkedIn, they realized that, first of all, they were spending somewhere around $20,000 a year. But they also learned that several of the memberships were for employees that no longer even existed.
Right. Yeah.
So they cut those out immediately and saved $6,000. Now, $6,000 is a lot easier, because if you cut $6,000, that goes to the bottom line. You now have an additional profit of $6,000. However, if they wanted to make $6,000 with additional sales, they would have had to find $100,000 in sales.
Right. Yeah. That's the and that's well covered in the book. I think I told you, like, the when I first had it explained to me by a third party, I was like, I don't get it. But when I read it in the book, it made a lot more sense in terms of when you tie everything to that actual profit level, the profit rate, then all of a sudden the math all works. Right?
Yeah, and by the way, that third party, obviously someone you haven't talked to even ask to bring his name in here, but he's somebody I worked with, and that helped him significantly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we won't bring him up.
No, but
we'll get him on a future podcast.
Yeah.
So,
but I know for a fact that helped him out dramatically.
Yeah. We got to do some more of that around here. So that's the plan. Do you have any last thoughts on the book or?
You know what? What I want to make sure is that people are getting an incredible amount of value for it. So that is my hope that people are getting that much value for it, and I hope that after they purchase it and use it, I would love to hear from them in regards to how it helped, if it did at all, so that I can make it better or improve upon it.
And how and where are people going to be able to find this?
You'll be able to find it on Amazon.
Okay. And we don't have an exact release date yet,
no,
right?
End of September.
Okay. End of September 2019. So once we get that release date, we're going to put it in the show notes, and you'll be able to get your hands on it. Yes. And digital only, correct? Or are you printing?
Well, it's print. No, it's going to be hardcover.
Okay.
And it's going to have 2 different covers to it.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. We talked about that on the course too. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Run that down.
Well, first of all, my daughter is in illustrations. She's just graduated from college with an illustrations degree, and she did all of the illustrations for the book, including the covers. And so the Small Business Blind Spot cover is originally was a business owner, a man in a suit on a high wire with a blindfold. And one of the thoughts that I had was that I shouldn't use just the man to symbol business owner. So I asked my daughter to create a second cover where it's a woman in a suit with the blindfold on the high wire. So I think that actually really is. I'm very happy that I have 2 versions of it.
You'll be able to take your pick when you buy it.
You can or you can buy the set.
Yeah, well, that's even better. See, why not?
Why not?
Yeah, well, that's great. It's exciting, and it's an excellent book. So I recommend everybody run out and buy it.
Thank you.
As soon as it's available.
Thank you very much.
And let's move on to what we try to include in all of these Smarter Business podcasts is we talk a little bit about use of video in business. Now, Tony, we talked about this beforehand. You haven't really used a lot of video in your business.
What's video? No, I have not. I've actually been terrible with that.
So, but that I thought would be fun to explore on the podcast. So why? What's been holding you back?
It's a matter of what I can get done. So I like to get things done. Mm-hmm. That's part of what I do when I coach is help keep people accountable and actually finish what you start. So when I look at anything, I think about the time I have available and what I'm capable of getting done. And there was no doubt to me that the podcast itself was a lot easier to get done, especially when I started it, than having the whole video thing going.
Sure.
Now, you can probably make the argument to me that why not just do the podcast like we're doing this one with someone as capable as Barack behind the scenes just filming the thing.
Yeah, well, I could say that, but you said it first, so.
You know what? Maybe with this great setup that you have, that I need to figure out how to do that because you're right. I should be doing video.
Well, and then I'm gonna put a little twist on that and make the question even harder, right? So if in your perfect world you were to start, say, marketing your company through video, what do you think that might look like?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I think it would start like I always try to think what's the MVP, right? The most viable product. And I think it would be filming the podcast. It would be just doing something as simple as that, because I I think that just, I'm already creating the content.
Right.
So that would be, and I suppose then another area that I could go into is I've put together several presentations, some of which you've seen at the CEL, and I could probably create a video form of that I in fact should. I should.
Those are two great ways to kind of take content. And this is just something that when we're consulting with clients and so on, we talk a lot about. It's so effort intensive to come up with meaningful content that, like, if you're not using it in every kind of way possible, you're missing out on some of your internal value for it. So presentations, that's a great point. You can take a presentation that you're giving anyway, record it, and then you have it as and I'm not talking to you necessarily, Tony, on this, but anybody, you record that presentation, and then that you have it at your fingertips. You're able to send it out when you have the possibility of a speaking engagement. You're able to send it out to clients that you're trying to prove that you know what you're talking about. And then it's a similar thing on the podcast or anything like that. We've made a lot internally of videos based around blog posts. We've made we're starting this up with our rebrand and repositioning that we did, and it's great because you can chop it up into all kinds of little bits like we did for episode 1, and you get all kinds of content to throw out there. So.
Yeah, I can truly buy into that, because I do know just from the podcast itself that I've picked up a lot of business on that alone. Mm-hmm. Because what the podcast has done for me, I've noticed, is that one of the first things that people typically do is they'll go to the website, and considering that the podcast is the first thing that they see, a lot of times they'll just press play and listen, and considering that these are 10-minute bite-sized podcasts, they really get to they know me better just based upon that alone. And that sells them a lot,
right?
And I would only believe that you could probably multiply that with video.
Sure.
And
that speaks to what I was saying at the beginning there with expert status. They not only know you, but they know that you actually know what you're talking about, right. Which is a real issue sometimes, right? Yeah. People will, they'll. Some folks will sell anything, so it's good to know that the person behind that actually knows what they're talking about and can deliver. So
yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not offering the value, people are smart. They're gonna figure it out.
Yeah,
and it won't last because it's a small town too.
Oh yes, well that's the beauty of Buffalo, right? Is it's such a small town that. I feel like people are on their best behavior for the most part because
kind of have to be
2 degrees.
Yeah, right.
So, okay, so we can move over to either talking about your disc golf game or one thing that we can move on to the smarter business. Question.
We're already almost near the end of the.
We're getting there
already.
Well, since we already talked to Barack, we could get a time check, Barack.
I'm just getting comfortable.
We're at about half an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, see?
Moving right along
Time
here.
flies.
Oh, my goodness.
So let's talk about disc golf.
We got to talk about disc golf. You're one of the few people that I've run into that actually knows what it even is.
Yeah, so Tony and I played around at disc golf, and we'll put up some clips of we didn't get a ton of clips. I was too focused on my game, I guess. But kind of following up, we got some discs made by Dynamic Discs that were hot stamped with the new logo, and we gave them out at our launch party and went and we've already played a few rounds. We got I have a few more lined up, and we'll it's a good way to kind of something a little different that we found that people are often into as well. That's a fun way to get outdoors and have a good one-on-one meeting or company meeting and throw the discs a little bit. What did you think? You've played before, though. You're not a total newbie like some of the folks we've been playing with.
I played a couple of times before, so I'm pretty new. I hadn't played before this summer.
Okay.
And partly because I had an injury which prevented me from running, so I'm always trying to find another way to stay active. But it's a great way to enjoy some of the pleasures of golf without having to have to pay for it, because there's no cost. You don't have to reserve a time because you could pretty much jump on any time. There are no golf carts, so you do have to walk, and it's an enjoyable walk in the park. And if you're a competitive type, it's kind of fun to compete with one or three other people.
Sure, you can ramp it up or you can ramp it down. The one that we played, Paul and I played the day before. We didn't keep score, so you can go either way with it.
I like keeping score. I gotta admit, it's a game that the millennials love. It's amazing how competitive of a sport it is. It's far more of a millennial sport, which is great to see. And then there's people that show up with a backpack of 24 discs that are really into it, which is incredible.
Yeah, we saw a few of them out at Chestnut Ridge when we played, right?
Yes, we did. And they could throw that disc, man.
They can move it, yeah.
I know now to not say Frisbee.
Oh, yeah.
Say disc.
Yeah, you don't want to. Yeah.
Frisbee.
Disc.
Come on.
It's
amateur. It's amateur hour. Frisbee.
Disc golf, right. So, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And, yeah, we'll have updates on future ones, and we'll get some clips up there. All right, so let's get into this is the meat, the big question of the episode, right? Smarter Business Podcast. I'll recap too. Last month, Joe Neiman said, hire happy people. That was his one very smart tip, his way to make your business more effective. Do you have a single tip that is maybe, I don't know, you're going head to head with Joe here? Hire happy people. What's Tony say?
Well, I guess this might be a little bit of a long answer. I hope you don't mind. But what I've discovered with working with a lot of small businesses is that many times they'll say they're struggling with cash flow or something like that. And cash flow is probably the most lagging of lagging indicators. By the time you have a cash problem, there's a lot of other issues that have gone wrong because cash flow is never your problem. The problem are all of the issues upstream that cause that to happen. Okay, and so what I've discovered with working with a lot of these businesses is that even before we can get into the numbers, there's usually these topics that nobody wants to talk about because they just cause fights, arguments, emotional breakdowns, things like that. So it's important to get the team in the room, your top executives, your key employees, the family members, whoever they are, in the room, and get them to a point to feel so comfortable, that psychological safety, that they can say anything without it becoming emotional or personal or anything like that. So what I've learned, and really the value that I bring, has a lot less to do with the numbers than it does with getting them to feel that psychological safety. And part of the way that I do it is that I like to start the meetings and say to everybody in the room, I want you to be able to answer this honestly to yourself. And I want you to feel comfortable with sharing with the rest of the team everything in regards to these two questions. What am I not saying that needs to be said? So I want everybody in the room to not hold back, because that happens so often where they just don't want to share something because either they're afraid somebody's going to take it personally, emotional breakdown, whatever. What am I not saying that needs to be said? And the second question is, what am I saying that's not being heard? Because a lot of times people keep saying the same thing over and over and over again and feel that other people are just not listening. Mm-hmm. So if I can get them all to feel comfortable with both of those, then I can truly get a far more psychological safe place for people to actually talk about the real issues. And that's the key to success. And that's one thing, that those two questions. Now, what I was doing for the longest time was getting them to answer and to try to create that psychological safety. And then I had heard a Tim Ferriss podcast, and I forgot who he brought on that said it so concisely with those two questions. But I've used that ever since, because that is perfect. That is exactly what you're trying to accomplish. Again, because if you can do that, and my goal then in the room is to make sure that we create the great accountability. So in other words, one of the things I say is I want to make sure everybody before we leave the room has properly answered those to themselves. Because the last thing I want to hear when we leave the room is it getting back to me somehow that after you left the room, you had this complaint or you had this issue or whatever, because part of my accountability as the coach there, the facilitator, is that if I hear that, the next time we meet, that's where we're going to begin. I'm going to make sure you're aware that I heard that, and I'm going to make you accountable for that, and we're going to talk about that first, because this room is about safety.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. I mean, that is a big issue, right? Within any business, kind of, if the communication's not truly open and you're not talking about the things that need to be talked about, then things can fall through the cracks, or things can not get fixed when they need to. So
people are not really communicating with each other.
Right. So communication, if we sum it up, real communication.
Real communication.
All right. Excellent. I like it. That would make a business smarter for sure.
Yes.
And we kind of finish up here with an open-ended question. Is there anything you want to kind of add to the podcast? Anything that you feel like we didn't touch on that's important to kind of put out there to the audience? Joe recommended a book in this space. If you've that's a good avenue to do that. But it's if there's anything that you feel like has been unsaid.
Yeah, I guess two things. If we're going to talk about books, one of the books that I shared, I'm part of I facilitate a mastermind group at the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, and one of the books that was by far the one that gets talked about the most is called "Never Split the Difference: How to Negotiate If Your Life Depended on It."
Yeah, like your
by
life
Chris
depended.
Voss.
Yeah, that's a great one. I've read it.
It's fantastic, and I know several of the students in the class that saved thousands, tens of thousands, just on that alone.
Sure.
So it is definitely worth reading. And then as far as just learning, I teach a how to read your financial reports class at UBCEL, and there's another one that's starting up in October. And if you don't really fully understand how to read your profit and loss and your balance sheet, then you're missing out on a tool that if you did know, can help you just become far more profitable. You could make far less decisions that are going to cost you, and you can hedge your risk in a way that you never hedged before. And with the class, what I can do is help you get to the point where you can understand your company's financials as well as any other companies, and learn to ask the smart questions so that you'll never be fooled again. And then use that information to actually improve your operations.
That's excellent. Yeah.
It's a 7-week class.
And I have I know somebody who's taken it, and they They swear by it. They said it was the best class they've taken.
That's great.
So.
That's great. That's great to
Is
hear.
that person real? What do you think, Tony? No, it is a real person. Yes. And I won't name names, but yeah. Okay. Well, that's it. And we're up over our target mark there. So we're going to shut it down. But thank you, Tony, for coming on. It's not so far over. It'll be fine. Yeah. People can shut it off early if they're not interested.
Barack's finger is on the off button as we speak. All
right. Well, thank you for coming out.
Pleasure.
Thanks for taking the time. And I look forward to the book. Plug it one last time for us.
Small Business Blind Spots, the 8 most common blind spots that business owners fail to see.
All right. Thank you, Tony.
You got it.
Okay. That wraps up this episode. Check out Tony's new book. And if you're a business owner interested in pushing your business to the next level, check out the CEL Core program that Tony and I mentioned during the show. It's been transformational for my business, and Tony is a big part of that. I'll drop a link in the show notes. Thanks again for checking out the Smarter Business Podcast. Subscribe and comment on this episode to help us grow our audience.